Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Joe Kelly. I am the program host with the Community Relations Department of the Rochester Hills Public Library, and I'm here to welcome you to this evening's Author Talk program, The Living Room, a Cancer Survivor Story with Bonnie J. Addario. Please join us on Tuesday, June 8th at 7 p.m. for our upcoming Author Talk program, Her Three Lives, with Kate Holohan about her latest psychological thriller. For tonight, we will carry on with our program. We will, I believe, have a section for questions and answers later in the evening. But as for the audience, they will remain muted throughout the program and won't be able to unmute to account for any audio issues that could cause. But you can feel free to ask questions in the chat. And I'm sure myself or Danielle will be available to moderate for any questions you might have. The program tonight will be recorded. It'll be available 1 week from today on the YouTube channel at rhpl.org. And I would like to continue with a short introduction for tonight's program specifically. Welcome to those of you who are able to join us today to learn about the latest in telehealth and The Living Room, a lung cancer community of courage, a book written by Bonnie Addario, our co-founder, the co-founder, board chair, survivor, and inspiration for thousands of patients here and around the world. This book shares powerful stories of 21 lung cancer patients and how they found ways to survive and thrive. The program is being hosted virtually by us here at the Rochester Hills Public Library and is being run and brought to you tonight by the University of Colorado Health Cancer Center with author Bonnie Addario, Danielle Hicks, Chief Patient Officer at the GO2 Foundation for Lung Cancer, and our special guest, who we are so glad was able to make it, Dr. Philip Stella, and the Director of Medical Oncology at St. Joe's, Jim Pantelis, and Michael McCarty, survivors and advocates. And having that intro passed, I would also like to open tonight's program with a brief synopsis here of The Living Room, a lung cancer community of courage. So please stand by while I give that. Lung cancer. The mere word strikes fear in all of us. Fear of the diagnosis, the treatment, and the ultimate prognosis. Where is the hope? It can be found in The Living Room by Bonnie Addario, a 17-year survivor of stage 3B lung cancer who established the Bonnie J. Addario Lung Cancer Foundation in 2006, along with the Addario Lung Cancer Medical Institute in 2008, and is now co-founder and chair of the GO2 Foundation for Lung Cancer 2019. A determined activist on behalf of patients suffering from the disease, Bonnie has built an extraordinary global network of fellow activists, patients, doctors, oncologists, researchers, and caregivers, a thriving and ever-growing community devoted and committed to advocating on behalf of those patients and families affected by the disease. Among all cancers, none are more pernicious than lung cancer. Nearly 150,000 Americans are lost to the disease every year, amounting to around 400 every single day. It accounts for 1/3 of all cancer diagnoses, the most deaths of any cancer, and as many losses as the next 3 most deadly cancers, breast, prostate, and colon combined. The Living Room, which draws its name from a virtual support and education group live streamed internationally once a month by the GO2 Foundation, tells the stories of 20 lung cancer patients who have bravely fought the disease and found ways to thrive, not just survive. The goal of Bonnie's efforts is to break down the barriers and stigmas associated with lung cancer and demonstrate how the new wave of treatment options are moving to make it a manageable disease. The people who you will meet in The Living Room will lead you to believe that miracles are all around us and they're happening every day, and that they might, just might, happen to the next cancer patient who picks up this book. And as noted here, all proceeds from The Living Room will go directly to fund research and patient services. So I hope you're all very excited and moved by all these accomplishments and all these fantastic feats already noted in this introduction. And without further ado, I will go ahead and pass off the introduction to Danielle. So Danielle Hicks, please take it away.
Hi, Joe. Thank you so much for going through all of that. And welcome, of course, to Bonnie and Dr. Stella and Jim and Michael. Jim and Michael, as you guys will see as we go through this conversation, are two of the folks that are featured in this book, two very special people featured in this book. And Bonnie's going to talk a little bit about how those sort of choices came to be and how it was a difficult choice for her out of the thousands and thousands of patients that she has worked with over all these years. I think, Joe did a beautiful job of reading the synopsis. And I think one of the things we're going to be talking about with Dr. Stella a little bit later in the program is stigma and the face of lung cancer and what folks sort of tend to think when they think of lung cancer versus what it is. And this book really, I think, exudes what it is. And I think a couple of quotes from a very recent Reader's Digest review are good examples of that. So bear with me for a second. One quote is, "This is what lung cancer looks like. The people you are about to meet are its face. They are you, they are me, they are all of us." The next one is, "The living room concerns itself with learning how to live. In that respect, the message drawn from its pages are applicable to us all. The profiles are incredible testaments to the power of human will, as well as medical science at its level best." And then last but not least, "Entering the living room," which I'm going to hold up here, living room, is like meeting 20 special people you'd like to claim as friends. It's a book as informative as it is inspiring, as eye-opening as it is uplifting, as relevant as it is refreshing. A tour de force of form and functional celebration of life that salvages hope from despair in a mesmerizing and astonishing reading experience. So those were just three of my favorite little kind of picks from what was a very long, beautiful review. If you haven't seen it, I highly suggest it. And with that, we're going to jump in. And I'm going to start with Bonnie. I know you consider yourself a very fortunate lung cancer survivor. Can you give us a little brief synopsis of your story? And then let's jump into why you wanted to write this book.
Sure. I lost my mom, my grandfather, an aunt, and an uncle, all to lung cancer. So lung cancer really has, been a huge part of my life for a very long time. And something that I was determined, if I made it through the knothole, I would do something because to change the stigma, mostly because at the time in 2005, the stigma was keeping research money from happening and research in general from happening. And, none of it was moving fast enough for me. So I thought, what if I write a book and show the people, the world, hopefully, what lung cancer patients look like and who they are? And that's what I did for the book. I chose 21 people. My goal was to get ethnicity addressed, gender addressed, age addressed, get enough of all of that in there where the book really did replicate what people that have lung cancer look like. So it's also named after the room you see, or where Danielle is sitting. That's our living room. And that's where we hold our education meetings and our support meeting and everything like that. So that was a perfect name for the book. And I'm just thrilled. It's doing really well. And anybody that picks up that book can find themselves in there somewhere, whether it's a certain genomic marker, whether it's whether it's by age or anything. And hopefully that is going to, I can't wait to hear what Dr. Stella has to say today about stigma and give us any help we can to, really address it even further. That's all I have to say.
I think that's great. And I think, you sort of touched on a couple of things that I know sort of run rampant throughout this book, and that's hope. And one of the things
your battery's gone
is community, right? So the community that you're representing, even only with these 20, people in the book, is representative of the community as a whole. And hope is something that is not always easy to find for folks, especially when they're very first diagnosed. What role do you think, final question before I jump in to ask Dr. Stella a couple questions. What role do you think hope plays in a patient's experience?
Well, it's Emily Dickinson who described hope this way. It's something with feathers that perches in your soul. It's, it's just something that's within you, and you either have it or you don't. And our goal has always been to give patients hope. Even if they came without it, they leave with it.
That's great. Thank you. Dr. Stella, I'm going to jump to you really quick, not necessarily about the stigma portion, but I wanted to ask you, number one, why you chose lung cancer as a primary area of focus.
I'll tell you, my gray hair, so I'm one of that demographic, one of the older. So I've been doing this for 37 years. And I remember in 1990, when before that I trained at Mayo Clinic, and we didn't really have a lot of things for lung cancer. And I remember when I first came to St. Joe's, the pulmonologists, anybody that had stage 4 lung cancer, we would rarely see, and that's because they would basically say there's really no hope and go fishing. And so they wouldn't even send these patients to us. It was unbelievable. Little by little, the field advanced, and we got better studies, and we got a few drugs that were effective. And over that time, I've been really fortunate to see an absolute transformation in the medications and treatments that we have for lung cancer. They've truly changed people's lives. Some of them were right here on this video call. And it's just been absolutely amazing to see. So it's been very exciting to offer these people hope. The conversations I have with them today are so different than the ones I've had in the past.
And do you see a measurable difference in your patients who are able to attain hope during their experience versus those who can't seem to find it?
I would say that patients who can't attain that hope, which we really try to offer that to them, they generally don't do as well. They typically may not avail themselves of all the options, but it's amazing though, in the human spirit, there's ingrained in them is a bit of hope. And what you've got to do is support it. You've got to, water it a bit. You've got to give them a reason to hope. And so that's so important to be able to bring that out of patients, because everyone has, when they're faced with the diagnosis of lung cancers, especially stage 3, stage 4 lung cancer, you need that hope to get by every single day.
That's great. I could not agree with you more. Jim, I'm going to switch over to you really quick, if you don't mind. And you have a chapter in the book, as does Michael. And will you give those watching today and those who might come back and watch later post live a sneak peek into what you discussed in the book insofar as it pertains to your story?
Sure. My name's Jim Piantellis. I'm one of Dr. Stella's success stories. And I'm actually, I think, one of 3 in this book. I was diagnosed in 2005, September of 2005, with initially a stage 1B lung cancer, went into the operating room, came out of the operating room at stage 3B. It had spread to the farthest lymph nodes that the surgeon had extracted. And I was really, really fortunate. In 2005, the things that were available were somewhat limited. I went through surgery. I went through chemo with carboplatin and Taxol. concurrent with radiation that seemed to go on and burn my neck to death. But and I mentioned that it was concurrent because that wasn't standard of care at the time. But I had a doc that ran a lung cancer clinic in 2005, which was pretty much unheard of. I was really fortunate. The day that I went to that lung cancer clinic, my wife and I went, and she was 6.5 months pregnant. So we got a lot of attention. And then shortly thereafter, on the day of my second chemo treatment, my daughter was born up on the second floor of the hospital. I was getting my chemo on the first floor. And Dr. Stella moved around the schedule so that I could be upstairs when she was born. And she's now named Stella. So the things I would tell people is, if you're going to get diagnosed with lung cancer, try and borrow a pregnant woman and then name the child after your doc and tell him that he might have to pay for tuition if you're not around, because it seems to work. I'm 15 plus years out, and I've been NED, no evidence of disease, since 2006. So life is pretty good. My daughter is now 15. She has 2 younger siblings, and life is pretty neat. I like it a lot.
That's hope.
Yeah.
That is hope. And I think it's interesting. I didn't realize the sort of parallel treatments that you and Bonnie had. Of course, in 2004, she also had carbotaxol and radiation at the same time, pre-surgery as a 3B patient. But as a lot of you know, she was told prior to kind of putting together, because you're correct, there weren't lung teams, comprehensive, lung cancer programs were very few and far between. And for those of you who don't know, Bonnie is my mom. So I've been around this lung cancer business since 2004, and put together our own sort of multi-D team. And she's a 17, I lose track of time, year survivor. But all the things that have come along with that, our weddings and grandchildren and now great grandchildren. And I know that I'm telling your story because I know you are very modest and don't like to, but I think it's I didn't realize you guys had the same treatment. You guys can swap chemoradiation.
We have.
So Jim, tell me a little bit about what hopes means to you. I guess stepping back, start with, where for you did it become attainable? Because I know, I talk to lung cancer patients that are newly diagnosed all the time, and they're like, hope, what are you talking about? This is terrible. It's not something that I think is even within my grasp.
I think my dad died of lung cancer when I was 26. He died 7 days after his diagnosis. And what he had was then called oat cell carcinoma. It was a small cell carcinoma. And he died really hard. It was a very painful death. So when I got diagnosed, we had a couple of things going for us and a couple of things not going for us. The couple of things going for us were that we had, Kathy and I married somewhat late. We went through fertility. We went through everything. My daughter is the product of IVF. So we were really, really, really emotionally and financially invested in having a child. So I started making deals, and Phil Steller was a part of this because we would make deals about, will I live to see this child born? And he would promise me that I would. Then shortly after she was born, she started having seizures, and she had a brain bleed. And so the deals became steps, right? I want to live until she gets out of the ICU. I want to live until this or that or the other thing. So you make little deals, and you start making deals in the weirdest kinds of ways. When Stella, my daughter is named Stella, when Stella was in the ICU, in the NICU, I happened to walk into the NICU while a neurologist was holding her hand in the isolette, and was just looking at her and talking, and I was behind this woman, and all of a sudden she crosses herself, and I just burst out crying. And we spent the next 45 minutes talking about the power of intercession. She had been praying to her dead grandmother to intercede on Stella's behalf. And then we started talking about walking the Camino, and making promises to saints that you don't know. And you find hope in little ways. You take what's there and you cling to it because it's available and it's yours. So
I love that story, Jim. And I think it's so powerful and important for folks watching to be able to hear. And this kind of points back again to lung cancer patients being people. They have lives just like everybody else. They're your neighbors, they're your friends, they're your parents, And I think one point that I want to, before I jump into the next thing, I want to kind of reiterate, because I think it's such a valid point for any patient, or valuable point for any patients who might be watching this, is that sort of goals of care, shared decision-making conversation that you had with Dr. Stella. Because again, not a lot of patients get the opportunity to have that. And in that, there is hope, whether you recognize that that's what you're doing at the moment or not, just that, okay, we're gonna baby step this instead of looking at it at one big thing. So thank you for that. So we've talked a little bit about, hope being a big part of this book and generating this sort of sense of community. How does it feel to you to be a part of a book that put such a positive, hopeful spin on a really scary diagnosis? And what do you hope people take away from it?
Is that me again?
Yes. And then I'm moving to Michael with the very same question.
I don't know yet. I really don't. This is kind of new. I hope that people understand that I feel like I was diagnosed in ancient times, right? The treatments that are available for people today are completely different than they were 5 years ago, let alone 10 years ago or 15 years ago. I'm here and I'm alive and I'm still kicking, and there are some people on Capitol Hill that don't really, that would prefer that I wasn't knocking on their door every year, probably. But the big thing for me is that the first thing that people do when they find out they've got lung cancer is they go and look it up online. And all of the statistics that they're going to find are all real. They're all accurate, but they date back to the 1990s and 1980s. And there wasn't even a standard of care for lung cancer before 1991. So we're lumping all of the mortality statistics together. And all I would remind people is that we have no statistics for someone that's diagnosed in 2021. We don't even have any statistics for someone diagnosed in 2019 yet. So all of the statistics are real. They're just not real for them.
For everyone. No, I agree. I remember back in 2006, when the foundation first started, we referred to it as sort of throwing pasta at the wall and seeing what sticks. I mean, that's literally how people were sort of being treated, because there weren't a lot of options, regardless of your type. And we didn't even know about all of the.
Yeah, but that's the Italian analogy.
Yeah, well, I'm Italian. Okay, Michael, I'm going to turn to you, and I'm going to ask you a series of same questions. Can you give us a sneak peek into what your chapter of the book looks like?
Yeah, mine's not as clean as Bonnie and Jim's. I was diagnosed when I was 43 in 2012. I live in mid-Michigan, so initially I was diagnosed there with stage 3B adenocarcinoma, non-small cell. But by the time I had gotten to MD Anderson, they essentially told me I was stage 4. I had a, tumor in both the upper and middle lobe of my right lung, all of my lymph nodes. A tumor had wrapped itself around my pulmonary artery, which was one of the reasons I wasn't going to be able to be operated on. At the time, they told me I had less than 18 months to live, but a doctor by the name of Dr. Kamaki, who actually was the radio-oncologist who adopted me, she was, strangely enough, she was born in Hiroshima and was 2 years old when the bomb dropped.
Wow.
And talk about connectivity here. And she thought, well, if radiation can do so much damage, maybe it can save lives. So she opened a trial up, plopped me in it. They used proton beam. I did it for like 30 and a half weeks. I did something like 13 rounds of chemo. The cancer, I was NED in about March of 2013. Came back in 2014 into my spine, ribs, left lung. But at the time, they did another biopsy and they determined I had ALK positive translocation. So I got to take this little magic pill. And in 2015, the cancer came roaring back, as these medicines don't always work, right? The cancer finds a way to work around them and you get submutations. So in 2015, I got really sick. And I actually found my way to St. Joe's Mercy. I knew I couldn't travel. I was too sick to travel to MD Anderson. There, they told my wife I had less than 20% chance to make it through the night. All my organs were failing. And I got with a fantastic doctor at St. Joe's. And I have been on my last targeted therapy for 6 years. So, including 17 brain mets in between. So I have still in treatment and still kicking about. I do have some of the consequences from the proton initially, but other than that, I'm alive and well.
You look awesome.
Thank you.
You look awesome.
It's a story too about progress and the progress that's been made in this space. Everybody's touched on a little bit. Jim, mentioned that when he was diagnosed, and Bonnie as well. It's a completely different. The treatment options now are above and beyond what they were, 15, 20 years ago and before that. So very happy that you found your way to St. Joe's and were found to have ALK. So my next question to you is the same again as I asked Jim, especially given your circumstance early on, when did you find hope to be something that was attainable, and where did you find it? Or did you?
Well, I tell you what hope is not. Hope is not statistics, right? It's not the number that you're told I got 18 months. In 2014, I was told I had 3 to 6 months to live, or less than 20% to make it through the night. So hope, I didn't find hope in the numbers. I tell you what, one of the biggest moments for me is I had a friend that I worked with, and his father-in-law was in town, and he heard my story and said, I want to meet this guy. And we met up at a Tim Hortons, and, he prayed for me. And he started pointing me back to a book that I had actually probably a week or two before that was cursing, because I was so mad at what had happened to me. Why me sort of speech. But I found hope in my faith, right? And that was probably the beginning of my hope journey. And then, I have found hope in research, in advancing research. I found hope in people like Bonnie and Jim, and actually there's another individual in the book named Lara, plays a big part in my story, actually.
Yeah.
Activity again. You find hope in the strangest places. Just real fast, Lara, I had met at a GO2 event, the earlier form of GO2 in Washington, D.C. We flew on the plane together. I knew that she was at St. Joe's. I was at my local hospital here in mid-Michigan. And right before I went unconscious, I told my wife, hey, listen, Stella's got something going on down there. I just spoke down there the prior November, and I was like, these guys have got something going on. Like, well, how do I get you there? And I'm like, I got Lara on Facebook. I go, Lara. She called Lara, who actually had just had surgery herself.
Yeah.
She pushed all the right buttons and got me into St. Joe's. So the people, right?
Yeah, I love that. And I think, we've been, this is the third sort of stop on our book tour since it was released on the 18th. And so I've been getting to talk to a lot of folks. And really on some level, everyone kind of brings it back to other people in the community and how important meeting those folks and connecting with them and talking to them and the beautiful friendships that have been made are a huge piece of this, but maintaining hope, right? Having someone to talk to who maybe hasn't identically walked in your shoes, but has walked close enough in them that they get it and that they understand. So
that's why we came up with the sentence, a community of courage.
Yeah.
There's something you all have in common, and it's how courageous you are and how you deal with the adversity of, what you have to deal with every day. Yeah, in some form or fashion, and how you reach out to each other. I love it. I absolutely love it. The hugs and the loves and the handshakes. And, we have people telling us all the time now, COVID's over. It's time for us to come back to the office for the living room, and they miss each other. It's not enough on virtual. It's not enough on Zoom. You need to touch and you need to hug and you need to get that kick.
Agreed. Dr. Still, I think you had something to say.
Yeah, I was going to say Mike's comment about, how he's going to get down to St. Joe's. It's just so interesting because we have, Lara was a nurse navigator too. And now we have a whole cadre of nurse navigators, but the number to call was 712-HOPE.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, that's great.
Line for everybody who wants to call or think about a referral or anything like that.
Yeah.
So we've had that number for a number of years. It's 712 is our local thing, and it's 734.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that Mike came as close to dying as I've seen a lung cancer patient. I remember him being in the ICU. He was on a ventilator. He was extraordinarily sick, and we had to get him this drug. The response and the duration of that response is nothing short of miraculous. And because he did talk to our lung cancer group the year before, and so it was like touch and go. And there was a lot of prayers, I think, for Mike, and to see doing so well now is fantastic. And he's a great example of, when I talk to patients, I tell them sometimes with stage 4, I say, well, what I can and can't do. And I said, well, what we need to do is get you in remission because I can't cure you now, but I've got to keep you going until the next thing comes down. The next thing comes down. And that's Mike exactly.
Right. And it is happening that way. It is, more new drugs in the last 5 years than in the last 5 decades. That's huge.
Keep the ball in the air.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, the miracles sort of being everywhere and Mike being a testament to that. There are thousands of patients out there who are testaments to just that, which is why it's so important to go back to what we talked about earlier. I think Jim brought it up, was the whole Dr. Google thing. Stay off the internet because you are not a number. You are not a statistic. Right?
I don't think you all realize how important your stories are to other patients. You probably do. I mean, that's why Bonnie wrote the book, right? I mean, to know and to hear. When I sit down and talk to patients that may have stage 4 cancer, and I say, well, I'm not going to cure you, but I'm going to try to get you into remission and all. And but sometimes the patients who are coming to me, they have a lot of misconceptions about it. As soon as you say stage 4 cancer, you can see them almost shudder, because that just sends a message, sort of out there that, oh boy, you bought it, forget it.
Right.
And I try to educate them that that's not necessarily. We're seeing many 5-year survivors now when we weren't doing that before. But to have someone that they can that they can see has done well with this disease, that it's not all the gloom and doom that they hear about it, that is more powerful than anything I can say to patients, because they can say, well, look at Jim, look at Mike, these guys have done very well. And what it does for the patient in terms of generating hope is that, well, he can do it, I can.
Right.
And that's why your stories, I think, are incredibly important.
Right. Exactly.
I agree.
And
go ahead.
I remember I had to tell a couple of patients, yeah, this is great, but go deeper. I know you have more to say. I know you have more to say.
Laughing. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're going, okay. But they weren't really ready, but then they felt so good about letting it all go, because there's nothing that the others haven't already felt.
Agreed.
Or know is
my
coming.
final question before I jump into stigma, because I really do want to spend, at least 10 minutes sort of talking about that and how it's affected progress, and how, we sort of hope this book will at least be a piece of, the pie that's going to change that. But what do you hope that folks that read this book take away from it, right? Because it's not just a book for lung cancer patients. I mean, it's a book for everyone, really. Whether you're sick or whether you're not sick, and talking about community and these sense of courage that can be found within the communities.
Well, I think we've already touched on it. I mean, there's a common theme. It's connectivity between patients and people, and hope and the faith. When I was asked to be a part of the book, it didn't take long for me to say yes. Why? Because I thought it was a really great idea that people didn't think I was a unicorn. That there are people out there that are like me, that survive. And when people, just like Dr. Stella said, I mean, if you know that there are survivors out there, it gives you hope, gives you a place to go. And, the more positive you are, I think the better your outcome's going to be. But there was also an underlining current there. I mean, it's one of the soapboxes I harp on. It is very unique to lung cancer. I mean, the funding for research for lung cancer, it's criminal. Frankly, it's criminal. And I saw a statistic on some of the information you all had up, but 150,000 patients will die a year. That's roughly 463 patients a day. That number seems light compared to the COVID numbers we've seen, sadly, but that's still like an airplane dropping out of the sky. And if we had airplanes dropping out of the sky every day, we would change the way we would fly. And so I think what Bonnie is doing is changing the way people think about lung cancer. It's putting a face to it. And hopefully it's going to change the way we fund lung cancer research, because research dollars are working.
Right.
I think that's a perfect segue into sort of the next piece of the conversation, because stigma, I believe, to some degree has had a pointed effect on exactly what you're talking about, Mike. So we're going to move to this part of the program, and the final part of the program, where we spend a lot of time talking about hope as it pertains to the patients in the community, but we also wanted to kind of float in there, what's happening in the outside of this community, and where is hope sort of, poking its head. And I think, destigmatizing lung cancer, and I'm hoping we're on our way to doing that, is one of those things. So Dr. Stella, can you just sort of talk a little bit about what stigma is, whether it's, social or self-perceived?
Yeah, I mean, the concept out there is that you did this to yourself, right? You were a smoker, and as a result, it's you only have yourself to blame, and that, of course, couldn't be any further from the truth. And the patients many times they're either like Mike and they were never smokers, and many of the ones with targeted that were using targeted therapies were never smokers, but or they're patients that quit years ago, and they sort of got the message and they stopped, and unfortunately, they developed cancer, 10, 15 years later after they've done that. And I do believe that has affected the funding in Washington. I mean, you look at it compared to the breast cancer funding, there's all these poor women who've got breast cancer, and it's a horrible disease too, and it's very common. But if you had that same kind of dollars going to lung cancer, it would be, the cures would be coming along fast and furious.
Right.
Fortunately, because of the technology and the science, those cures are coming. There's a lot of interest in, and it's funny because you start getting one, like I remember the first targeted agent when they came on board, and then all of a sudden, hey, there's this whole bunch of targets. And that generates, the drug companies, there's a lot of incentive there to come up with new ones. And then the same thing with immunotherapy. Immunotherapy with lung cancer has been extraordinarily successful. And it just opens up these paths. And I think that's made a huge difference. But there's nothing. I remember I was the chairman of our national organization's government relations committee, and I'd be on Capitol Hill and trying to convince them to, increase funding for the NIH and the NCI. And we were actually successful during my tenure there. That a number of years we were able to increase it $2 billion a year. And frankly, it was the only bipartisan thing and bicameral thing that they could agree on was funding research, which was thank God for that. But that was for all different types of cancers too.
Right.
I think it's interesting because I think, stigma tying back to things that we're afraid of, right? If we, nobody wants to get lung cancer. So if we kind of put it in this little box by saying, you have to be a, 75, 80-year-old man who's smoked 3 packs a day for 30, 40 years. Those are the only people that get it. Then people feel safe, right? But I think they don't realize, and we've had this discussion internally over and over about, the American Cancer Society and the American Lung Association did these really great jobs at trying to get people to quit smoking. But what they didn't realize they were doing was really elevating the stigma around lung cancer and who got it, right? So I think there's a little backpedaling happening now, and we're all working hard to help alleviate that. And I think what a lot of people don't understand too is how stigma and this lack of funding has impacted care, whether it's around access, decreasing screening and awareness, and in some cases even physicians not offering biomarker testing or treatments to patients because they just don't get it or don't see the need. Can you talk a little bit about some of that impact in the care space as it directly relates back to what patients are not receiving?
In terms of the care they're offered?
Yeah. So I think one of the things we hear, and it's different because we talk to people from all over the country and all over the world, really. A lot of people, in particular in some more rural areas where maybe they're seeing a general oncologist who doesn't have the benefit of being able to specialize in any one disease. And they're expected to know how to treat everything and anything that walks through the door, right? And so they call us and they're like, well, my doctor doesn't know this or my doctor doesn't know that. And do you think that stigma is a direct association to that in some of these instances where it's sort of like, well, he, she, or whoever, do you think it's impacted that at all?
I'm not sure that it's impacted their ability to get care. It's access to, access to clinical trials, access to the latest treatments and things like that, that the rural community and the inner city, sometimes the underserved communities, that's a huge problem.
Mhm.
And we can go into the whole, targeting African Americans with menthol cigarettes and things like that,
Yeah.
it's okay to target them as opposed to other people, but there's, I'm not sure once you get it, at least in the medical community, I don't think anybody's saying, well, you did it yourself. I think it's more maybe perception of maybe other people or, I don't get a sense that somebody's got a cancer. We're going to do everything we can for them, no matter what the problem.
So stepping back before even diagnosis, then when we look at screening, and I know the guidelines were just updated. And so now we've got, roughly 16 million people in this country that currently qualify for screening, right now, yet 4% of them are walking through the door to get screened. Do you think stigma is associated with that? That low, turnout for screening?
Well, we would never accept that with breast cancer, right? Women getting mammograms, we'd never, ever accept 4%. And perhaps the stigma is that, those people are addicted to cigarettes. They're not going to do what's right for them and stuff like that, and that probably is a kind of pervasive attitude. And yet you had this CT screening was one of the major advances that we've seen. And I've loved it because we're a center of excellence for screening and nodules. And I have it's really been one of the great things to see in my career is, as we did this, we were watching very carefully our statistics in the tumor registry in terms of what stage they came in. And as we started doing this, we started a stage migration downward to more and more patients getting stage 1 and stage 2. Mm-hmm. That was very powerful.
That's huge.
Huge. And it was exciting. I mean, save lives by getting there earlier rather than having to see me, that was great. And then, but, screening is even more effective if you tie it with smoking cessation. So we built a whole smoking cessation program around that in a nodule clinic. That's fantastic. We would never have done that years ago,
Yep. And no question, screening is a very powerful tool that we have been fairly recently given. I just wonder, and where it's one of the things we're grappling with at GO2 organization, right, or foundation, is how to drive more people who qualify into screening. And based on the current guidelines, you have to have a fairly decent current or former smoking history. So that sort of self-identification, like right up front, right, as having done something bad in order to get this screening. And this is just, again, in talking with patients and other patients who have been diagnosed. And I know Bonnie can tell the story probably better than I, but, patients saying, I tell people I have breast cancer because I'm tired of the question, right?
I was just gonna tell that story to you.
Yeah.
This was a long time ago, and we had this wonderful, beautiful patient, and she said, I have to tell you a secret. I tell people I have breast cancer. I don't tell them I have lung cancer. And I said, oh my, why do you feel like you need to do that? She said, I just don't want them to think I'm a smoker. Mm-hmm. She really was concerned that she would be considered a smoker. So then she said, and I never smoked a cigarette in my life, but smoking is killing me. Mm-hmm. So the stigma, making people feel like less than human beings and afraid to tell people what kind of cancer they have. And it's like, such a door opener for me to think, wow,
you quite often, when I meet new patients, and this is by no fault of their own, but they will self-identify as I have never smoking lung cancer. Right. And even that sort of perpetuates sort of the stigma within the community itself, right? But they don't want to be associated with it, which is sort of this whole, sort of vicious cycle. So how do you think, Dr. Stella, we can make sort of societal changes, around stigma to help sort of move the needle here?
Um, that's a good question. I just had a thought before then. Is a very similar kind of stigma was that I lived through. I remember seeing the first cases when I was at Mayo Clinic. It was with AIDS. AIDS is the same thing. It's associated with a behavioral thing, either homosexual sex or drugs and things like that. And, and you got a behavioral thing like smoking too. And that's very hard it is very hard to get around, to get beyond that kind of thing, because people think, well, you sort of, there's always that kind of thing, you did it yourself,
Right.
And I don't know what the answer for that is. I think it's more people like you getting the message out that, we can do something for these people. People, there's all sorts of behavioral things when you think about it that we blame people for. Motorcycle guys who don't wear helmets and they get a closed head, well, they deserved it, right? I mean, why did you do that? Not wearing your seatbelt and stuff like that. I don't know what psychology is to try to change that kind of thing, but there's this tendency to do that.
I think, our work with especially young people, we just got our Genomics of Young Lung trial published, yay, in JTO, and we're doing an epidemiology study now. And when we bring young people to the table and tell people, well, this little girl, is 22 and she has stage 4 lung cancer, they're just appalled, absolutely appalled. But it makes them think, it's like, wow, I didn't realize that this was a disease for young people. Because if we wind back to AIDS, remember it was that young boy, Brian White. And when he got AIDS and people realized that, wow, I could get this too. So they didn't work to end AIDS entirely, but they worked to end it for themselves when they saw that they could get this disease too. And that's how we have to do this. We have to say it's not smoking. It's, look at all these people in the numbers that are young, that are getting lung cancer. And they have to think, well, that could be my son or my daughter or whatever. And it's kind of a new way to look at it. Yeah. We're not going to cure lung cancer patients and get them to quit smoking at the same time. I have to put that up front there and say anyone can get lung cancer. Absolutely anyone. And we know that.
We do. And I think we're well positioned with a lot of things that we sort of touched on today, the advances in not only diagnostics, but treatments, how those sort of infuse and offer this hope and optimism, and giving people the facts, right, that anyone can get lung cancer, I think is a big piece of it. And of course, books that are sort of pointing out and identifying communities such as ours and such as those that can be found in the living room, a lung cancer community of courage. So I think we're at time. We did go a little bit over because we started a little bit late, but I do want to thank everyone for joining us. I really appreciate it. It's been a wonderful conversation. I'm going to turn it back to Joe to close out on his end. Thanks, everyone.
Give Heidi just a minute to hold up her heart. No, hold up your heart behind you.
Her ribbon.
Your ribbon. Yeah.
No problem. We were glad to give you that little time, and we got to learn a lot of wonderful things and hear from just all these incredible people, these stories that we got to hear, just a little bit from Jim, a little bit from Michael, and I can't imagine how many more wonderful, inspiring things are in that book. So I really hope just anybody here might have gotten a little extra hope, might be able to share something like this with a family member, somebody going hard. You guys have done amazing things here today, and doing amazing things all the time. So thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you everyone in the audience here who was watching tonight. We really appreciate you taking the time to watch this, and hopefully you got something really powerful out of it. I know I did. And I'd like to thank all of our wonderful guests here. You all did such a fantastic job, and you were very inspirational messages. a lot of wonderful information to share. And we hope you guys will enjoy we hope you enjoyed the program. We hope you'll join us for some of our upcoming programs. And for now, I will go ahead and pass off my role. And if any of you have any last messages you want to share, any information on how to support the foundation, where to go for more info on stuff like that, if there's anything like that you wanted to share, you can feel free to do so. And we'll thank everyone for joining us here tonight. So please, if any of you have any last comments.
Just thank you. You know, the more libraries we go to, the more people we get to see and we get to be heard. And that's what we need to do. We need to keep pushing and keep moving and keep showing the world that lung cancer patients deserve to live a long time, a very long time.
You guys are doing a great job and very, very important work. Thank you for that.
Thank you. And for anybody who doesn't already have the book, please go get it and check it out so you can hear Jim and Mike's full stories, as well as the 18 other people that are highlighted in here. So thank you all.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. You guys are
Hi.
all. We had an all boy. What is this? Huh? That's great. Getting
See you in a couple of months, Bill.
Thanks, guys. I'm going to jump.
Okay.
Problem.
Bye all.
Hey.
All right, I will go ahead and call it there. So thank you all for
Thanks,
joining us.
Joe. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for being here, guys.
Bye,
You all
Jim.
have a wonderful night.
You too.
Bye, Jim.
Bye. Bye, Sally. I see you.
Good night, everybody.
Night.